off your engine! Nappy Ed, and he says, Scotty, I'm a cheap and practical guy speaking. I rarely hear anything about repairs and maintenance costs of Avalons. I know they're more luxurious. Do they cost more than Lexuses or Toyota Camrys? Basically, the Toyota Avalon is a fancy Camry. As such, they have generally very low cost. They don't break very often. The only problem that I ever saw was way back in the days, in the 1990s or early 2000s, when they first came out with the variable valve timing engines in the Camrys. They made some of the cams wrong and they had to replace them or the entire engines. They generally did it under warranty. I had a customer who bought one and it started leaking oil, and I said, what's your cams? Look, they made them wrong. I called up the local Toyota dealer. Of course, I called up, being Scotty, people know who I am, and they just said, we'll come and pick it up and fix it free. And they put another engine in free. They didn't charge her anything. But that was a long time ago. If you're talking about late model one, they've never had that problem for years and years and years, and they just can run forever. You pay a lot more than you do for an Avalon. The Avalons cost more than Camrys. You get a lot more luxury too. They ride a little bit better, but they really don't have problems. They're well-made vehicles. Well, if you're one of those people that hasn't driven your car for months because of the pandemic, there's a few things you should look out for. One, and I found it here when I moved to Tennessee, look out for mice and rats nests, because they'll often nest inside there. See it on my old motorcycle, there was a dead mouse inside. Now, luckily, it didn't eat any of the wiring on the motorcycle, so that's a good thing, because they can destroy electronics. Another thing you want to look at is your tires. If you really sat a long time, like 9 months, 10 months or longer, tires can actually get a flat spot. When they sit, they're sitting on the tires, can actually stretch the belts of the tires. Now, sometimes if you're lucky, you drive it out and then it rounds itself out again. But if you find you drive a couple days and it acts squirrely and lumpa, you might have to replace the tires. That's one reason that it's a good idea every week to drive the thing 10 or 15 minutes. Because you're driving it, the tires are being exercised. If they just sit there on the ground, they're going to be kind of lumped out from sitting there all that time. And of course, make sure they're full of air. Your battery might go bad. It's another reason. You want to run it like 10, 15 minutes a week, because that'll help charge up the battery. Now, if it's a deal where you can't, take my advice, get one of those trickle chargers. The modern ones are electronically controlled. You plug them into the wall, you put them on the battery, and they actually exercise the battery. They make it go on, off, and then recharge it, because that's how your car normally works. You start the car, it loses some electricity, it charges itself back up. And these things don't cost 30, 40 bucks these days. Everything is computerized, and they don't cost much. Then it'll keep the battery and electrical system up so you don't have to mess with it. And here's another thing you might not think of. If your car's going to be sitting a long time, fill the gas up before you park it. Because if it's mainly gas in the tank, there's less air, so there's less oxidation of the fuel. If you have like a quarter of a tank, you got a lot of air in there, and your fuel will oxidize and come apart a lot faster. Modern fuels are mixed with all kinds of things, especially with ethanol. And if they sit too long, they start to come apart. So if you have less air in there, they're going to oxidize less. So keep the gas tank up to the top. And another thing that a lot of people don't think about is, if your car sits for a long time, let's say you got kids or grandkids, they eat and they leave crumbs everywhere. Ants, cockroaches. If you got a big enough hole, mice and rats will get in wanting to eat that food. Years ago, my wife had a Toyota Cressida, and the seats were leather and they had cracked because it was 20-something years old. So I got these nice New Zealand wool seat covers. They're like $250 a piece, but they're real comfy. She said she thought that was weird. I go in and take the cover off, and there's a colony of the ants in the driver's seat because they were in the big cracks like Grand Canyon. They had made nests, they had eggs and everything. So it's a good idea to clean all that stuff out of your car so there's no food supply for ants or mice or rats. And plus, a lot of the stuff will rot. And then it'll smell, you'll get a musty odor and stuff. And if you're worried about vermin or anything, you can watch my video where I showed how you can plug one of those ozone generators, roll the windows up, and then all the oxygen turns into ozone, which animals, ants, whatever can't breathe. So anything inside that vehicle, if there's mice or cockroaches or whatever, it will kill them, and then they won't be there anymore. Of course, then you got to find where they are and get rid of their bodies too. I guess you don't care if it's dead ants or something. It's not going to really do anything. But if it's a mouse, then you'd have to find it because it would smell. But if they got in and it smelled weird, they'd probably run out while you're doing it anyways. So now you know some tips of what to do if your car's sitting too long. Leland Bacon says, greetings from Tipton County. My girlfriend's 2012 Nissan Versa has poor acceleration. Did the transmissions have a problem with slipping? Well, it's a 2012 Nissan Versa. They all have problems with acceleration because they got tiny engines. They don't go that fast. Let's say she has a CVT transmission. 9 years ago, Nissan made one of the worst CVT transmissions in the world. They just feel like they're slipping because that's the way they were designed. They're just terrible transmissions. Now, the newer ones, I do have to say, they're making them a lot better than they used to. They're learning from the other companies, and they do work a lot better. But, let's say you can find a used one, a used car lot. Pretend you're going to buy it and you want to look at it. Take it for a road test. You'll probably find out it feels exactly the same as hers. Unless hers is wearing out, in which case my advice would be either get rid of it now or just drive it that way, and when the transmission goes out, then get rid of it, because I've seen people sell a 9-year-old Versa. They're lucky if they get $1,500 for it. It's worth nothing, so you might as well drive it anyways. But for your own knowledge base, see if you can find a used one at a car lot, drive it. It'll probably be exactly the same, because they're turds with those CVT transmissions, and they just have no acceleration. That's just how those things are. Here we go with Tesla and their lack of quality, because in China, Tesla has to recall 29,000 of their Model S and Model X. And these are vehicles that were made in the United States. These weren't vehicles made in China. These are vehicles made in the United States and sold in China, because their suspension might lead to an accident. Now, these cars were built between 2013 and 2018 at Tesla's Fremont, California factory, his big bragging factory that obviously has quality control problems. And of course, as usual, Tesla is proving that in one respect they're the same as all automakers. They're trying to deny any culpability. Tesla's regulatory counsel says, and I quote them, "The root cause of the issue is driver abuse, including driver usage and expectation for damageability is uniquely severe in the Chinese market." So they're trying to blame it on the Chinese driving on bad roads and driving like maniacs instead of taking responsibility for not building them right. They're always trying to cover their own rear ends. It's basically unbelievable. Problem is that the front suspension forelinks can fail at the knuckle ball joint ring, so then the tire can whack into the wheel liner to hit the inside. You don't want that happening when you're driving, especially on one of these things. Let's say you have a Model S. It's one of the fastest cars out there. Be screaming down the road, and then the wheel smashes into the back of the wheel well. Not something you want to happen. And they also have a problem that if you have an impact, the connecting rods can be damaged on the suspension, and the front suspension fails entirely. Just what you want. You get hit, and you got to steer out of the way, and you can't steer anymore. No, not such a great thing. Now, the interesting thing is that the recall doesn't cover the Chinese-made Model 3 at all. It's the ones made in the United States. We all know they got quality controls. You've ever seen ones, the trunk stuff don't fit, but originally he was going to have robots build everything. And then he ended up having his workers make tents in the parking lot and build them there. So, that kind of tells you there's a little Mickey Mouse-dom going on here. Things have gone so bad for him that now Consumer Reports does not recommend the Model S anymore. They used to, but they don't, because of all the different recalls that they've had. Cad Juicer says, "Hello, Scotty and friends. I'm thinking about getting a motorcycle and was wondering what would be a good starter motorcycle for a beginner." Well, the Japanese make excellent ones. If you look at any of their 250cc motorcycles, they're excellent beginner motorcycles. You can go down to 125 if you want, but you could have some fun with the 250cc. Do not, if you're starting out, go out and buy one of those screaming 600 racing bikes. They're just too fast. They have too much power. But any of the Japanese people like Hondas, people like Yamahas, people like Suzuki's, they're all excellent made vehicles for a beginner. They're lightweight enough that you can really handle them, but they also have enough power that you can have a serious amount of fun on them. Just look at the price range of what you want to spend, and look at all of them. Look at Hondas. They're great. The Yamahas are great. The Suzuki's are great. Most of the Japanese motorcycles are well built for whatever particular style you want, whether you go for a little one, medium one, big one. They're all pretty well made. You can do a little research about what you want want to go up into. But for a beginner, I mean, you really can't go wrong with any of those Japanese ones. And a lot of people swear by the Hondas because they seem to run forever. If you just want to take a wild opening guess, go get a Honda, and those things basically can run forever. And here's another bit of advice. Look for a used one. You can get them a lot cheaper because when guys learn, then they want a bigger one. They're going to sell their smaller one. You can get a good price on it. Since they're smaller motorcycles, they're not motorcycles that have had the heck thrashed out of them going 180 miles an hour. They generally are in really good shape, and you can get them at a very reasonable price. And then you can do the same thing. If you want a bigger one, well, then you can go get a bigger one later, and instead of paying a full price, you paid less than half. Not a bad idea. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.